A single envelope slides across the hardwood floor. Inside, one sentence. You do not meet our community standards. Mariah Johnson had the money. She had the credit. She had the dream, but not their permission. Not because of what she lacked, but because of who she was. And what happened next changed everything. The night it began was quiet. A plain envelope, no bigger than a bill, slid through the mail slot and landed on the floor. Mariah Johnson picked it up without thinking. She thought it was routine. A utility notice maybe, or junk mail. But when she tore it open, her chest tightened. The letter wasn't long. Just a few lines. After reviewing your application, we have determined that your request does not align with the long-term community standards we maintain. Signed neatly at the bottom, Maplewood Heights Homeowners Association. Mariah stared at the page. Community standards. 2 words that weighed more than the paper in her hand. She had the money. She had the credit. She had spent months planning for this house. A red brick beauty with a wide porch and a magnolia tree out front. She had even measured the living room walls for her grandmother's quilt. Now, with one short letter, it was gone. She crumpled the paper in her fist, eyes drifting to the framed photos on her wall. Her parents, both smiling despite tired eyes. Her graduation from Howard University, where she became the first in her family to earn a degree. The award from her marketing firm for excellence. Proof she belonged anywhere she chose, but not here. Not in Maplewood Heights. That evening she called her younger brother Jason. His voice crackled over speaker. They actually wrote that. Community standards. That's exactly what it says. Jason let out a sharp laugh. That's just code, Mariah. They're not even pretending. Mariah pressed her palm against her temple. I don't get it. I did everything right. I followed the rules. Why does it feel like the goalpost keeps moving? Because it does, Jason said softly. But maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's the start of something else. Mariah didn't answer right away. She stared out the window at the streetlights flicking on one by one. She had always been told to fight for what she wanted. But how do you fight polite rejection dressed up as standards? The next morning, she drove back to Maplewood Heights. She parked across from the house she loved. Her hands gripped the wheel. Kids rode bikes in looping circles. Sprinklers ticked across perfect lawns. A woman jogging slowed when she passed Mariah's car, her eyes lingering a second too long before flicking away. Mariah whispered to herself, "They never wanted me here." Later that week, she tried scheduling a meeting with the HOA board. Maybe it was an error. Maybe something could be fixed. But the president, Robert Hanley, sent back a curt reply. The decision has been made. There will be no further discussion. Mariah's stomach knotted. This wasn't just about a house. It was about being told no. About being told she didn't measure up to some invisible standard no one would define. That night, over dinner with her longtime friend Elena Cruz, Mariah let the anger pour out. I could have written the check on the spot. I had everything lined up and they still said no. Elena leaned back, crossing her arms. They're playing a game you weren't meant to win. Then I'll change the rules. Elena arched an eyebrow. What do you mean? Mariah stared at her fork, her voice low. I don't know yet. But I'm not walking away. Not this time. The words hung heavy in the air. For the first time since the rejection, the sting of defeat gave way to something else. Not despair, not even anger, something sharper. Resolve. And deep down, Mariah knew the letter hadn't ended her story. It had only lit the fuse. Mariah couldn't sleep. The rejection circled her mind like a restless bird. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the porch she had dreamed of, the magnolia tree swaying in the wind, the laughter of her nieces and nephews spilling out onto that lawn. But all of it had been taken away with 2 hollow words. Community standards. The following weekend, she drove to Jason's apartment in Dallas. He met her at the door with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. His expression caught somewhere between protective older brother and worried friend. "You don't look good," he said, handing her the mug. She gave him a weak smile. "Thanks for the honesty." They sat across from each other, silence pressing between them until Mariah finally spoke. "I can't stop thinking about it, Jace. It's not just about the house. It's about what it means." Jason leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "It means they don't want you there. But maybe that's the push you need." Mariah frowned. "The push for what?" "To flip it back on them. They want you out? Then you walk in smarter than they ever expected." She shook her head. "Buying one house nearly drained me. How would I even think about anything more?" Jason shrugged, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You've never been the type to think small, Mariah." The seed was planted. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on work, on deadlines, on the endless stream of meetings at her firm. But the thought gnawed at her. What if she didn't just buy one house? What if she bought more? That night, she scribbled in her journal until her hand ached. Words poured out, about fairness, about her parents' sacrifices, about how she had carried every expectation and turned it into something tangible. Why should she stop now? The next morning, she called Elena. "Remember when I said I'd change the rules?" "Yeah," Elena said cautiously. "You sounded like you had fire in your veins." "I wasn't exaggerating." "What if I didn't fight for just one house? What if I bought 3? What if I owned part of the neighborhood?" Silence hummed over the line. Then Elena burst into incredulous laughter. "You're serious?" "I am." "That's bold. That's risky. That's the only way they'll ever understand you belong." Mariah's heart raced at her own words. She hadn't admitted it to anyone until now. It scared her, but it thrilled her too. She didn't just want in. She wanted control. A few days later, she met with Harold Kim, a real estate broker she trusted. They spread papers across a cafe table near Legacy West. "You want to buy multiple homes in Maplewood Heights?" Harold raised an eyebrow. "That's ambitious. I don't want one home anymore. I want influence." Harold tapped his pen against his notebook. "With enough properties, you'd gain HOA voting rights. You'd be in the room where decisions are made." "Exactly," Mariah said. "They can't keep me out if I'm at the table. It'll take serious capital. Homes there aren't cheap, I know. That's why I'll need partners." The word tasted strange. Mariah had always prided herself on independence, on never needing help to reach her goals. But this was bigger than her. That night she called Jason again. "I've been thinking," Jason chuckled. "That always means trouble. I'll need investors. Not many, just enough to get started. I'll handle the management. They just provide backing." Jason didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice carried pride. "Then I'm in. Whatever you need," momentum gathered. Within weeks, Harold found 2 properties going on the market. One from a retired couple moving to Florida, another from a family splitting after divorce. Both priced lower than expected. Both within reach. Mariah toured the first, a beige stucco home with a sunlit kitchen. She ran her hand along the counter and whispered, "Can you imagine?" "Imagine what?" Harold asked. "Me owning this. Them sending me HOA mail with my name on it." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. That evening, Elena and Jason sat around Mariah's dining table, paperwork scattered like fallen leaves. "This is real," Elena whispered, flipping through the contracts. "Yes," Mariah said firmly. "And once I buy, then what?" Jason leaned back, a grin spreading across his face. "Then you buy again. One step at a time." Mariah exhaled, her pulse steady now. She was no longer the woman crushed by rejection. She was building something bigger, brick by brick. The following week, she wired earnest money for her first offer. As she hit submit, a shiver ran down her spine. Half fear, half exhilaration. "They said I didn't fit," she whispered to herself. "Let's see how they feel when I own the place." The papers were signed faster than Mariah expected. Within weeks, the beige stucco house was hers. Keys jingled in her hand as she stepped across the threshold. the echo of her footsteps in the empty rooms reminding her that this wasn't just a house. It was her first foothold. She stood in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, and let herself breathe. Not relief, not yet, but something close. One house wasn't enough. She knew that. But it was a start. Over lunch one afternoon, Harold reminded her, "One property won't give you leverage. You'll need at least 3 or 4 before you can influence the HOA. Mariah nodded, chewing slowly. Then find me the next one. Within a month, she bought her second. A red brick colonial being sold after a messy divorce. Negotiations were tense, but she pushed until the seller caved. Days later, she closed on a smaller ranch-style home, directly from an owner tired of the HOA's rules. 3 houses, 3 keys, 3 deeds in her name. Jason came over one evening as she stacked the paperwork on her dining table. He leaned against the doorway, arms folded. "You know what you're doing, right?" Mariah glanced up, smirking. "Enlighten me. You're not just buying homes. You're taking over a neighborhood." She laughed, but the sound carried weight. He wasn't wrong. The neighbors noticed too. Some greeted her politely. Others watched from behind curtains. Their whispers carried on the breeze as she pulled into driveways. The stairs were heavy, but Mariah kept her chin high. One Saturday, while supervising repairs at her newest house, an older man approached. "You're the one buying up these homes," he said. His tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. "Yes," Mariah answered, steady. "You plan on flipping them?" "No, I plan on staying," he studied her. "This community is particular." Mariah tilted her head. "I've noticed." He gave a tight nod and walked away, but the weight of his words lingered. Days later, her first HOA violation letter arrived. Trash cans left out past pickup. Threats of fines. The tone was harsh, hostile, dripping with intent. She called the number listed and asked for Robert Hanley, the HOA president. His voice came clipped and cold. "Miss Johnson, I assume you're calling about the notice." "Yes," Mariah said, voice calm. "It's been addressed. But I'd like to talk about the tone of the letter." "The tone?" It read less like a notice and more like a warning. "We take our rules seriously. That's why this community maintains its standards." Mariah's jaw tightened. "I take standards seriously too, Mr. Hanley, which is why you'll be seeing more of me." She hung up before he could respond. By the end of that quarter, Mariah owned 4 homes in Maplewood Heights. 4 properties, 4 sets of keys, enough to secure voting rights at the next HOA meeting. The night of that meeting, she drove into the community center parking lot, her palms damp against the steering wheel. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about presence. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above rows of folding chairs. At the front sat 5 board members. Robert in the center, his suit pressed sharp as glass. He looked like a king at court, and the residents his audience. Mariah walked in, heels clicking against tile. Conversations hushed. Whispers rose. She sat near the front, spine straight, eyes forward. The meeting dragged on. Landscaping contracts, pool hours, neighborhood watch updates. Mariah listened, waiting, every nerve in her body tuned to one moment. Finally, Robert announced, "Open floor for resident comments." Mariah stood. The scrape of her chair echoed. Dozens of eyes turned. "My name is Mariah Johnson. As of last month, I own 4 properties in Maplewood Heights. I have voting rights, and I intend to use them." A murmur rippled through the room. Robert blinked, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, Miss Johnson, we are aware of your recent purchases." "Good," she said, locking eyes with him. "Then you're also aware that I received a letter denying me a home in this neighborhood. The reason given was community standards. I'd like that phrase explained. What exactly does it mean?" The room fell silent. Robert's jaw tightened. "That matter has been closed. The board determined—" "You determined nothing," Mariah cut in, voice rising. You used vague language to keep me out. Yet here I am, sitting in this room, legally owning more property than some people on this board. So I'll ask again, what does community standards mean? A woman at the end of the table shifted uncomfortably. The phrase is meant to preserve harmony in the neighborhood. To ensure new residents share the values we've built here, Mariah tilted her head. Values or barriers? The tension snapped taut. Whispers filled the room. A man in the back muttered, "She's got a point." Robert leaned forward, his voice clipped. "If you have concerns, you may file them through the formal complaint process." Mariah's lips curved into a thin smile. "I'm not filing a complaint. I'm making a statement. I'm here. I own property here, and I'll be at every meeting from now on." For the first time, she saw it. A flicker in Robert's eyes. Not confidence, not control, but unease. 2 weeks after that first meeting, the games began. At first, it was small. A violation notice about grass being a quarter-inch too long. Another claiming porch lights stayed on past midnight. Then one about a car parked a few inches over the line. Mariah held the latest envelope in her hands, shaking her head. She called Jason. "They're trying to bury me in paperwork," she said, waving the letter. "What's it about this time?" "Apparently the grass in front of Ashcroft is a quarter-inch too high. They even included a photo," Jason snorted. "A ruler? That's harassment." "That's exactly what it is." At the next HOA meeting, Robert tried to make her the center of it all. "Violations are rising across the community," he announced. His tone was sharp, his gaze sliding toward her without saying her name. Mariah raised her hand. "Since we're talking about violations, are inspectors measuring lawns with rulers now? Because that's what my notice suggested." The room shifted with quiet chuckles. Robert didn't laugh. "We maintain high standards here, Miss Johnson. Consistency keeps the neighborhood desirable." "Consistency is fine," Mariah said evenly. "Singling out homeowners is not. If the board wants to talk about standards, then let's apply them evenly." For a moment, silence. Then one of the board members, Margaret Lane, spoke softly. "She's right. We've all let things slide from time to time. If rules are enforced, they should be fair." Robert's glare snapped to her, but Margaret didn't look away. After the meeting, a tall man in his 60s approached Mariah. His name was Donald Price, a longtime resident. "You gave him a run tonight," Donald said, shaking his head. "I've lived here 20 years. I've never seen anyone challenge him like that. Does he always come down this hard on people?" Mariah asked. Donald smirked. "Not on people he likes." The words sank deep. This wasn't about rules. It was about power. The following week, things escalated. Mariah stepped out one morning to find graffiti across her garage door. Black paint, jagged letters. "Go home." She froze. The words cut like a blade. Her chest tightened. A neighbor walking her dog slowed, her face pinched with sympathy. "Terrible," she muttered. "I'm sorry you had to see that. Do you know who did it?" Mariah asked. The woman hesitated. "No, but it's not the first time someone's pulled something like this." Mariah took a photo, called the police, filed a report she knew would lead nowhere. Still, documenting it mattered. That night, over dinner, Elena's eyes blazed with anger when Mariah told her. "They're trying to scare you off," Elena said. Mariah nodded. "That's the goal. But it's not working." The fear pressed on her shoulders, but so did the fire. Every glance, every whisper, every hostile letter hardened into resolve. At the next meeting, Robert unveiled a new proposal. "To protect the integrity of Maplewood Heights," he announced, "we propose a limit on the number of properties any one person may own." Mariah's hand shot up. "So let me get this straight. If someone invests in this community, spends money here, pays taxes here, you want to punish them for success." Robert's smile was tight. "It's about preventing monopolies." "No," Mariah said, her voice cutting sharp. "It's about preventing me. Other investors have owned multiple homes for years, and nobody said a word. The minute I do it, suddenly it's a problem. Why is that? The room buzzed with murmurs. Margaret looked down at her notes. Donald raised his voice from the audience. She's right. My neighbor owns 3 rental properties and no one's ever said a thing. This is targeted, plain and simple. The tension crackled. For the first time, Robert's control wavered. His polished smile faltered and Mariah felt it. The shift. She wasn't an outsider anymore. She was a challenger, and challengers build allies. By spring, Mariah's presence in Maplewood Heights was undeniable. She wasn't just a name on deeds anymore. She was a voice, a vote, a face that couldn't be ignored. The cracks in Robert's control widened. It started with a small victory. Margaret Lane raised a concern about inflated landscaping fees. For years, the HOA had stuck with the same overpriced contractor. Mariah flipped through the reports, raised her hand, and said, "I'm not a financial analyst, but even I can see we're overpaying. Why haven't we looked for other bids?" The room went still. Robert's mouth opened, but Donald Price's voice cut in from the back. "She's right. We've been paying too much for years." Heads nodded. Before the night was over, the board voted to seek competitive bids. It was a crack in the wall, and once cracks form, they spread. Soon, neighbors who had once avoided Mariah started greeting her. Gloria Ramirez, a kind woman with warm eyes, touched her arm after one meeting. "Good for you," she said. "It's about time someone spoke up." "They've been running things the same way for too long," Mariah smiled. "Thank you. I'm not done yet." Whispers turned to conversations. Conversations turned to support. Young families thanked her for speaking against rising fees. Older residents admitted they were tired of Robert's heavy-handed ways. Not everyone welcomed her. Notes appeared on her doors. "Stop trying to change our community." Anonymous scrawls of resentment. But for every note, there was a nod, a wave, a quiet thank you. And then came the summer cookout. Mariah hosted it in the backyard of one of her rentals. Folding chairs, burgers on the grill, music floating in the air. Neighbors came. Gloria brought tamales. Donald arrived with sodas. Kids chased each other across the grass. For the first time since that rejection letter, Mariah looked around and felt something close to peace. Elena leaned in, whispering, "Look around. This is your neighborhood now." Mariah scanned the crowd. Laughter, conversation, connection. She exhaled. "No, it's ours." But Robert wasn't finished. The board elections were announced for July. Positions open: treasurer, member-at-large, president. Mariah stared at the notice. Her thumb brushed the bold letters. That night she called Jason. "I'm running." He didn't hesitate. "I knew you would." "Which seat?" "President," Jason laughed. "Go big or go home." "I like it." When she told Elena, her friend raised an eyebrow. "President? That's not just influence. That's control." "Exactly," Mariah said. "If Robert wants to fight me, he'll have to do it head-on." Word spread fast. Robert campaigned hard. His flyers painted him as the guardian of tradition, the man who had protected the neighborhood for a decade. He warned of outsiders with hidden agendas. Everyone knew who he meant. Mariah didn't stoop to his level. She knocked on doors. She asked questions. She listened. "What do you want changed? What matters most to you?" One evening, sitting on Gloria's porch, she said, "I'm not here to erase values. I'm here to build new ones that welcome everyone." Election night filled the community center wall to wall. The air buzzed with tension. Robert went first, his speech polished. "I've kept standards high. I've protected this neighborhood." Polite applause. Mariah stepped forward, palms damp, but voice steady. "My name is Mariah Johnson. Some of you know me. Some only know the rumors. I'm not here to divide us. I'm here because I believe in fairness, in transparency, in a community where everyone belongs. I was told once that I didn't fit here, but I've proven that I do. And so do you. All of you. That's the community I want to lead." The room erupted in applause. Louder than she expected. Robert shifted, his jaw tight. Ballots were cast. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, the moderator cleared his throat. For the position of president, by a vote of 68 to 54. The winner is Miss Mariah Johnson. Gasps, cheers, mutters. Mariah sat frozen, the words sinking in. She had done it. As she walked to the front, Robert's glare burned. But his power was gone. Days later, she walked the streets of Maplewood Heights with her head high. Neighbors waved, some warmly, some stiffly, but they waved. At her first meeting as president, Mariah sat at the center of the table where Robert once presided. She looked out at expectant faces and said simply, "We're not here to control people. We're here to serve them. From now on, this board will operate with fairness, transparency, and accountability." The murmurs weren't hostile. They were hopeful. Later that week, she and Jason stood outside the house she had once been denied. The magnolia tree swayed above them. "Funny, isn't it?" Jason said. "They said no to this house. And now the whole neighborhood answers to you." Mariah smiled, eyes fixed on the house. Sometimes the no is the push you need. The lesson wasn't about property. It was about persistence. She had turned rejection into fuel, silence into a voice, exclusion into leadership. And as she walked back to her car, she thought of all the women watching her story unfold. Women told they didn't belong. She hoped they'd remember this. Sometimes the walls aren't built to keep you out, but to see how hard you'll fight to break through.